Welcome back to my vRealize 7.3 video series. So in the previous part we have installed vRealize. Now we're going to do the initial configuration of vRealize. So that is, once you have finished the installation completely, everything is fine. We're gonna create a local vRealize account. We're going to create AD user groups and a couple of users I'm using in vRealize. Configure the AD integration, obviously sync Active Directory, and then we're going to configure the vRealize admins. So let's go. So initially we only created the administrator at vSphere.local, which I'm logging in now. So you can see in the domain it's vSphere.local, password enter. Wait. So inside of the tenant, we are not going to use the vSphere.local tenant. We're going to go to local users, click new, and just going to create a user account. Get an email, username, local admin, password. Okay. We're going to have to make it an actual admin in vRealize. So obviously now we created local user, which we now make a tenant admin. So we're going to search for local admin. There we go. And IaaS administrator. We don't really need to add it as an IaaS administrator because we're going to have one when we integrate it with Active Directory, but we're going to do it anyway. So here I'm just going to show the differences actually. So we have a system administrator, IaaS administrator, and I really highly recommend reading the information center regarding the system rules and tenant rules. It can be quite complex. I'm going to combine some of the rules. In my lab, I usually have one admin who rules them all, but it's always good to separate them so you can actually learn it, as in what the rules do. So we've finished here. I'm just going to log out, and I'm going to log in as the local admin. So we're going to type a local admin, and the password I've just done. Wonderful. So as I say, so we've now seen that the login itself as a local admin is possible. So this is where we now would start to do the Active Directory integration. But of course, as I mentioned, we're also going to create a couple of roles or a couple of users. So I'm going to create some of the admins. So you can see it's a tenant admin I'm going to create. I'm going to create a fabric admin. And as I say, it's always worth to read the description to see what they actually can do. I'm going to create a catalog admin. But in my case, the catalog admin will do catalog admin, blueprint, architect, etc. I'm going to create an approval admin. As I say, catalog admin, which includes blueprint. And yeah, then of course, creating an IaaS admin as well. So just going to pop back into Active Directory. There we go. So just going to create a couple of users. The relationship between admin in AD and admin in vRealize automation doesn't exist. So just because it's a user doesn't mean it's automatically a user in vRealize. So just going to create a vRealize admin. My vRealize admin, I will configure it as one rules them all. So this vRealize admin is going to have permission to everything. Again, just when I have a lazy moment and I just don't remember which rule does what. So next, I'm going to create another one. It's going to be the IaaS admin. Yes, spell the IaaS admin. IaaS admin. Next, password. Of course, all of them have the same password. La-di-da. And as I said, so I have a IaaS admin. I'm just gonna check again so I don't forget one. So I'm gonna do a tenant admin and a fabric admin. That's gonna be the next one. So that's tenant admin, tenant hyphen RM. In your real environment, you obviously have actual usernames, but for me to identify, there's no point in having Joe XYZ being an admin. So I just want to separate them by users. Obviously, they're going to be a group. So if you have a production environment, you likely have a group which is called tenant admins, and then you have your username in it. How you do it? So just going to catalog admin. So next one. Obviously, how you do it in your environment doesn't really matter. I just want to illustrate the differences between the individual admin rules. And as I say, if you do it for an exam, it's always worth separating the rules, even if it's your own lab, because it's going to be quite confusing as to what you can see. For example, if you look in as a tenant admin, you really need to know what can you do, what can you see, what masks can you see within the array. So I'm just going to create an approval admin. I mean, you could even go more granular than that, but I'm not going for pain. I'm just going for clear separation. Okay, so that's approval admin. Anything else? No, not so far. So let's create actually a VRA user. So that is the user which consumes the blueprints. And as a business group admin, we're just going to use the VRA admin. So then also create two groups. So I'm going to create two groups. One of them is VRA admins, very cunning. And the other one will be VRA users. So just going to add VRA admin. VRA users. As I say, in terms of groups, you probably rather have a group called tenant admins, IS admins, and you have individual usernames in it, rather than this way. But the effect is the same. Fabric, IS, admin. Yeah, I'm using the group merely for the purpose of actually syncing them, so it makes it just easier. But you'll see when it comes to that. Let's do that. Well, that should be it. It's going to have a last check. So we have VRA admin, tenant admin, tenant admin, FDIS admin, fabric admin, catalog admin, and approval admin. There we go. Good. So now we have going to create the VRA, or add the VRA user to the VRA users group. That's it. Bob's your uncle. So these are the groups I'm gonna add into my VRA environment. I'm gonna enable advanced features. When you configure VRA, what you need is the DN, or distributed distinguished name, distinguished name of the group or user, which you can find under distinguished name. But this tab, attribute editor, will only show if you enable the advanced view. Let's go. So I'm gonna add directory, Active Directory, directories. So the system directory is new with 7.3, so you wouldn't have seen that before. You can't actually delete that because that's your default. So just gonna go back to directory, add directory. I'm going here for the integrated Windows authentication. My Active Directory is relatively small, so it shouldn't be a problem. But essentially, LDAP might be the better option if you have a larger Active Directory. So you just saw I have two sync connectors. We're going to add a second one at a later point. So again, administrator, UPN is administrator at the domain, so add vgame.co.uk, and my bind password is that. Obviously, it all depends how your Active Directory has been configured. So just gonna check the. Oh yeah, I forgot. Yeah, I forgot to say. Each user has to have an email address. So that is one of the main prerequisites. The sync of these users will fail unless your users have an email address. The email address doesn't even have to exist. It's just a matter of, when it comes down to syncing those users from AD, it is looking for the field. I'm gonna add the email address they're gonna have as part of another video. I will show email configuration, etc., and test it probably in conjunction with approval policies. And we're gonna have an email server then. But I'm just gonna add here 10 and up. Okay. Nearly forgotten about that. So that's good. That's done. Same for the VRA user. The groups obviously don't have to have an email address, but the individual users will. So as I say, that's the only thing you really have. I think it's a first name, last name, display name, and email address. But obviously first, last name, and display name are populated during the user configuration, but not the email addresses. Just gonna check all the users to make sure they really have all an email address. I don't mind showing mistakes or errors, but you can avoid them, may as well. Right, so let's hit next. It will now join the first sync connector to AD and will show you any second the domain. So obviously I only have one domain, I don't have any subdomains. If you do, you can select which one you want to sync. I'm only using that. I'm just gonna use the defaults here. To be perfectly honest, I'm not sure it makes much of a difference. It's probably important when you have workflows which require these things. So here is, as I say, that is where we need the distinguished name. So I'm gonna do the properties, attribute editor. Here's a distinguished name of my admin. So I'm going to copy that, hit the green plus button, enter it, find groups, select all, one of one group to sync. Next is the users. Same thing, right click, properties, attribute character, distinguished name, view, copy, Control C, which you obviously can't see on the screen, then find groups tick. In the next screen, you can add an individual user. Here, as a backdoor for myself, I'm just gonna add the domain admin itself as an admin or as a user to be synced. Click properties, attribute editor. Where's it? There we go. Distinguished name. Copy paste. That is it. So I'm just going next. The error is simply because there are nested groups. In the previous screen, I clicked sync nested users as well, which are nested groups. What that means is the user admin, for example, is part of enterprise admin, or domain admin is part of enterprise admins, but I'm not syncing enterprise admins, which is essentially what that error is all about. I'm just gonna see here. You can see I got 7 users, 8 users, 6 users within the VRA admin, plus my domain admin, and 2 groups, which is VRA user, VRA group. That's fine. So sync has started, and we're gonna hope we get the green check mark. There we go. And now we're gonna add the second connector. So we go to our workspace, select the second VRA appliance, chuck in our bind and domain admin password, hit add connector. And then we're gonna change also the LDP host name. That's gonna be our load balanced name, load balanced VIP of the VRA appliances. Add connector, wait. So it's now joining the second one to the domain. That's done. And as I say, LDP hostname needs to be the vRealize VIP. Hit save. And that is that part done. So if you go back to the Active Directory users and computers, you can see that those two vRealize appliances have now joined AD. It's not live, so the sync itself is essentially vRealize just keeps a copy of the Active Directory. So it's not just because you joined, it doesn't mean if you add another user to Active Directory, it's immediately visible. AD needs to be synced. So here I'm just going to create the users. So you search for a user, for example, here the domain admin. And as I mentioned, domain admin is supposed to be God of all things. So just going to tick all of it, all the permissions. That's not done. Next. Doesn't really matter. As well, just finish. Now I do the roles. So we have the vRealize admin. As I mentioned, that is also going to be the admin. Careful that I'm not using the group. The vRealize admin also has everything. So the only difference between domain admin and vRealize admin is from an AD perspective. vRealize admin is obviously a user, whilst domain admin is admin, yet both of them have full admin permissions. Next one, my brain. Let's just have a look at the groups. I'm just gonna go in turn. Right. So let's go top to bottom. Approval admins. We're gonna make it the approval administrator. So we can see at the bottom it shows what the user can do or what the user is allowed to do. And again, I would always check as well with the documentation to make sure the roles essentially are what else you want to give. So just see. Excuse me. Just looking for something. I thought I forgot something. Maybe not. Okay, never mind. No, that's okay, fair enough. So that's the approval administrator. You can make it an approver. That's the approver rule you saw in the document. Is something you configure later in the actual approval policies, but we're going to get there later. So it's catalog admin. So as I say, catalog admin, I want to do everything which has something to do with blueprints. So I'm going to do application architect, catalogs, infrastructure architect. So I can deal with infrastructure bits and bobs from the blueprints, software architect, so I can do soft components, and SaaS architect. Right, as I say, it depends on your internal policies really, so always have to discuss them with customers usually. So the next one is tenant admin. There. Finish. I'm just going to show you something. I'm actually going to add a tenant admin to the default tenant as well. So we'll see when you add a tenant admin now here. I'm just going to show you something. So we're going to log in again back as an administrator. Sorry for jumping back and forth a little bit, but I hope it still makes sense. Check with type. So you're in the tenant vSphere.local, and you can see the tenant admin is now here, the tenant administrator. Yeah, so that's another option where you can set it. And while we're here, we're gonna add the IS admin. Set it there. And right. So look, let's look into the domain. So now you have the selection, obviously, of your domain. So if you go in as a tenant admin, have a look at the tabs. So we have Home, Inbox, Administration, Infrastructure. We'll open the incognito window, because that simply makes it possible to log in twice into the same environment. Otherwise it would just log in straight again to the same array environment as a tenant admin. Again, domain, and I'm just going to log in as an IaaS admin. And let's put that on the left. Let's put that on the right. So you can see here we have Home, Inbox, Administration, Infrastructure under the tenant admin. I mean, if we go under the administration, you can see what we can do. And we don't have the tab under the IaaS admin infrastructure. We really only get the recent events, but under the infrastructure as an IaaS admin, we have the endpoints and agent, fabric groups, etc. So you can see that is why it's important or interesting to have really the group separation or the user separation. So you can see those differences, especially when you take exams. So if we do another incognito window, but that might not work, it might just pop me straight back in as well. Yeah, pops me straight back in. So hope I could show you three. You could use a second browser, but may as well just log off here. Let's close that. And let's see the catalog admin, password. And you can see now we have the design tab, where you can create your blueprints, your XaaS blueprints, your any other service and services and catalog items. So pretty much anything related to blueprints. Sometimes you might want to separate the creation of services and catalogs, or catalog groups essentially, from blueprints, but as I say, it all depends on your internal policies. So approval admin doesn't have any infrastructure tab, really only has access to approval policies, doesn't even have access to catalog or nothing. That's what we expected. Did I miss anything? No. That is it, really. So if you look in as a fabric admin, we haven't created a fabric group yet, which is why you wouldn't see anything under the fabric admin. So once we actually created a fabric group, which is, let me just log back in as the IaaS admin, just to show you what I'm talking about. Well, this is going to be part of a different video, but I'm just going to show you that anyway. So under endpoints, fabric groups, if you were to create a fabric group, this is where you enter the fabric administrator. Then you would see a heck of a lot more once you log in as a fabric admin, but as I said, we haven't created a fabric group just yet, so I'm not expecting to see anything but the inbox, really. Okay, so that was the initial configuration, really. So in the next part, we're going to talk about endpoints and fabric groups. I hope I see you there. See ya!